Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. Christina and I are joined today by our guest, Joe Messina. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Christina. Happy to be here.
Happy to
We're
have you.
excited. Excited to have you on. We've been working with Joe a lot in the last year and a half, 2 years ish, and now we currently actually have him as one of these students in our leadership class. So we've got lots of different connection points with Joe. But give us a little background, Joe. What's your background? What's your story? What brought you here?
Well, like I said when you first kicked it off before we started recording, you asked for it. People who ask for that story, um, I regularly see yawns, but I'll try to make it as exciting as I can. Um, I think it's noteworthy how I actually got into IT. For people who know and work with me, my dad was into early COBOL in like late 70s, 80s. Like we always from very early days had like an IBM XT or AT or something, some 8086 thing at our house that was just part of our life. So when I went to college, I never dreamed that it was something interesting enough to study in school. Um, so I studied economics because that was, that's how uninteresting IT was, that I thought economics was more interesting than it. So I worked for a financial institution and got involved in operations there. And then since I knew some stuff about computers, gravitated there. And, the long story short is, the rest is history. Just every job after that, I got deeper and deeper into it until it what I didn't think would be my career now is the main part of it. But when I look at it and look at my education and the things that interested me, it's really communicating, interacting with people, and some of my avocations that I think um, do me the most service at work. So
Mhm.
spend a lot of time writing emails. I find that having had training in the 5 paragraph theme really helps you in any kind of corporate communication.
Just for the endurance of writing that much, or the structure?
Yeah, just clarity is important. I worked for our one CIO told us if I have to scroll your email, I'm going to delete it.
That's pretty reasonable. And
Yeah.
over time, I've just probably have a shorter and shorter window. Be like, nope, nope, that one sentence is too long. I just
Big
scroll.
fan of the bullet points.
Yes. Bullet points definitely help. So, which one did you like best now, IT or economics? Which one is more interesting?
I really like the people part of IT, in the way that it relates to the business. I think that's really exciting, and especially in our economy now, it's a great place to be, especially where I am now, having it mixed in with healthcare. I think that intersection is really a neat place to be in the market, and you know, an opportunity to have an impact.
I've heard that economics is one of the few disciplines where, I mean, it is its own specific discipline, but it's one of the few that encourages kind of cross-disciplinary looks and looking at what the larger picture is, because you have to understand all these different influences that are kind of going on. And how much has that been true for your experience, and how you relate that to things like connecting business and IT?
It gives you a really good model for looking at results and um, complex systems and looking at data. What I've learned over the years is that, especially as an IT leader, we're leading humans, right? We're leading human people who are at work, and finding meaning in that as a manager is kind of a superset of looking at the world just in a utilitarian kind of way. I'm lucky enough to work for a company that is people-centered. So in that case, we talk and hear talk from even our most senior managers about things like humility. It's not like this at every company. So, if you've ever worked at a place that's just about the bottom line or the numbers, you can go to work every day feeling like I am a cog in a wheel making money for someone who's richer than me, right? In a people-centered organization, I think we try to get more out of people by looking at the whole person. I was thinking about this recently because my youngest is in college studying education, and she recently wrote a paper on the place of humility in the teaching profession. And her thesis was that in most other careers or career paths or types of work, your success is based on results that you achieve for yourself or for the company. It's, a certification, a promotion, a bigger project, a profit margin. But in the case of a teacher, their success really is in helping a student toward human flourishing. And to do that, the place of humility, humility is defined as putting yourself in a lower position. So, as someone who's serving a student and making that your end game, knowing that the end results of that, never really come back to the teacher. I thought it was a really, really neat take on that. And when I think about that in relation to working where I do, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I
That's a
love
good
the
way of
theme
looking
of
at it.
humility. It's definitely, it's always one of those buzzwords for leadership. It's like gotta be humble and humility. But then in practice, and you mentioned some of that, is if we're measured in the corporate world and the workplace by our individual achievements, then how do we integrate humility as leaders when it is all about helping others flourish, helping others achieve?
Yeah. And I think if you have um, it, understanding the whole person is a part of that. If you have a person that can perform a routine task every single day, you can get, in talking like an economist, you can get X output out of them. But if you look at the whole person and develop that and untapped skills and energies where they otherwise wouldn't apply them to work, and with a healthy work-life balance, this people-centered organizations believes that it's not just a zero-sum game. You can get X plus 2 out of them and make them happier, right? And I think those human connections, especially in the digital economy, are increasingly more important. Like Alex, you were commenting on decorations. Like, this is my feeble attempt at hospitality. Many, many hours of my day are spent on these types of meetings over a screen, and you used to be able to welcome people to your office with a candy dish, and those those days are gone for me, at least right now. So this is my feeble attempt at welcoming you to my screen.
For those who are audio only, Joe has a nice set of Halloween decorations in his Zoom background. So this,
Yes.
this is Zoom hospitality at its finest.
Yeah, this is
So you,
authentic too. It's not just a background screen.
Yeah, it's not a fake Zoom background. It's actually on the wall, on Joe's walls.
I'm still living in a blurred out void, so things are going well. You mentioned a couple of interesting parts. Like there's the idea of humility in that, if you're the teacher and you're serving this population, the rewards aren't necessarily coming directly back to you. You're intending to pass that on. And you also mentioned finding some of that meaning in leading people as an IT leader. Can you talk a little bit more about what you personally find meaningful and enjoyable in this kind of work?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels with coaching and parenting, which are two other pursuits of mine that take a lot of my energy outside of work. Um, in expanding people's horizons and, helping them find joy in their careers and elsewhere. Um, you know, and being in touch with the parts of the job that I love so that I can help, maybe instill that in other people. One example that we were recently laughing about in my family, a friend of mine and I both grew up loving hiking and backpacking. So we had daughters who were friends and they were probably, I don't know, 11 or 12. So we took them on the Appalachian Trail through Maryland, parts of Virginia. First big girl trip, right? And our our purpose was to instill in them the joy of carrying everything you need on your back for multiple days and nights, and seeing the beauty of the trail. I mean, especially that part of the Appalachian Trail. It's very rich in history and little side excursions where you can go and see historic sites. And if you do it at the right time of the year, it's just beautiful. Knowing that the real payback is to have, girls who feel confident doing that and can grow up and share that with other people that they love. But one of the things we learned, and we talk about this not only in the leadership training, but at work, our senior leaders are big on clarity. So you need autonomy. You provide people with autonomy, but autonomy also needs to be, partnered with clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes, we got to that point in a long hike where you're in the woods and, well, you have to use the facilities. So the girls, they had been prepped for this and they were ready to go. Like they had the autonomy and we thought they had the instruction to do what they needed. So I handed them the paper and the little camp shovel and sent them off to a private section of the woods. Just as before they disappeared into the brush, Sarah turned around and said, "So how do we clean the shovel?" We were like, "Come back, please. If you get poop on the shovel, you're doing it wrong. You had autonomy, but not clarity." So we straightened out the instruction. And long story short, they have spent many long hikes in the woods and were confident to know that they could always handle themselves. And I apologize, Christina, if this is the first potty talk story you've had on your podcast.
We've had worse. No apologies needed. It's a good question, though.
That's also a really visceral example for
Yes.
autonomy and clarity. It's a good one.
And I've seen poop on the shovel situations at work a lot of times, and it's autonomy without clarity. That's the result you get.
Yeah. Well, and I think what it's interesting is how you pointed out is that what's clear for you may not be clear for the others. And if there's safety, and in this case, it's, psychological safety, the daughter is actually speaking up and asking the question, then there can be that, well, okay, is this what we intend? Because that's my version of the clarity here. Is it the same as your version of the clarity? And I think that's where the step is missed a lot in the workplace and in life in general, is that like we assume that because it's clear in our head and it's clear in how we provided the instructions, that then it's universally clear. It's like capital C, clear for everybody.
Yep. Presuming that other people understand the thing that you understand goes hand in hand with the other side of having the courage, like you said, to ask the question.
Yeah.
So we talked also about some of the incentive structures that go into, like you were mentioning, like we have so many incentive structures that tend to go back to individual performance. But of course, by the time you get to leadership, it's about what you're kind of getting out of the team and what you can do there. What incentive structures do you like, or have you seen that you like, that kind of encourage that kind of thinking and getting into my reward is making the team successful?
As far as incentive for managers,
Mm-hmm.
I think finding people who are animated by that success by default is the home run hit right there, right? And when you find that person, just like a great player on the soccer field, it makes everybody else better because they practice with them and they pick up the habits and they pick up the joy of being on the field, right? And I say that from someone who's been a manager with great managers, and that probably is the single most impactful incentive is working with people who find that joy in seeing others succeed. Like that feeling, that core of teamwork is really something that's contagious.
Yeah, definitely
I
is.
think I recognize that because I've had the privilege of being coached by great coaches in various things, despite not really ever being good at anything. and having the opportunity to coach my kids in various things, throughout the years. It's
Mhm.
really been neat.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just about default incentive.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
reminds me of a conversation I had. It's not when I've heard this, and I used to believe this. Actually, no, I didn't, but I'll take that back. But it's a fairly common thing to hear, when people just believe like, oh, all jobs suck. There's just never gonna be. That's just what job is. That's what work is about. It's about being miserable, and there's no way out. And I have experienced the opposite, which is why, like I know that's not true. But the role of the manager, the leader, is huge in that, in allowing for that to not be the reality.
Oh, absolutely. I think an example, let's see, that I could think of is I coach cross country and track with a friend of mine who is a fabulous coach. And the age group of the kids is, first grade through eighth grade. So it's a mix of running through the woods in the fall, herding up kids to run, right? You talk about all jobs stink. Well, every other sport they've ever played, running is their punishment. And we're trying to
Mhm.
get them to go out there and do it and have it be fun. And he has developed just this knack of making the joy of being out in the woods and running around contagious. That includes, like, they'll, in the local park, they'll run the ski slopes, first, second, third graders at the end of practice for a starburst candy. It's just a little wee square. Like, they're convinced that it's worth it and they'll do it because it's contagious, and he understands the whole person. We were prepping up for like a 3 or 4 mile run uh, one evening, and because it was mostly older kids, and just as we were getting ready to go, this little first grade girl shows up, and Bill says, "No worries, we got this. Um, Mary Jane's legs are powered by her mouth. If I can keep her talking, she'll do 4 miles and won't even realize it." And he was right. So that's a coaching aspect, to understand the whole person, to get them to do things that maybe even they didn't think they could do, or God forbid could even do and enjoy. I think to take that to the workplace is it's a powerful tool.
Yeah. Some of that accessing that own personal joy is super important. So it helps a lot to have like a coach to have, or some similar figure that can reflect that and see that in you, or help create the situations for you. But to your point, Christina, like there's a lot of, hey, or there used to be particularly a huge amount of like work shouldn't be enjoyable. Like not only should, like is it not important that it should actually almost actively be painful. I remember talking to this guy he switched careers in his mid 30s, but spent decades feeling guilty. He switched it to being an archery coach, which he absolutely loved. He loved every piece of it. He got to travel, got to work with all kinds of people that were training for Olympics, and he loved it. And he felt really guilty because he'd always been told like work is not supposed to be fun. And so you end up with that side guilt. And then there's this kind of insidious thing now where it's like, well, work doesn't have to be fun. So then it like is almost this like it gives a pass to like, well, it can be pretty miserable, and both of these miss the idea that like, what if you did create joy? What if a starburst is what works? What if being able just to talk is what works? What if that's fine and you get to both be productive and enjoy it, and not see these as opposite ends of a spectrum?
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's a fine line between motivation, cajoling, and downright deception, right? I think some in life and in work, there are things that you wouldn't undertake if you knew all the consequences about them. So being challenged at work by a good manager gets you into things that you end up finding so rewarding, but you never would have thought, boy, I could do that, or I would want to do that, right? So seeing those results turn out well is a real, it's a real joy at work.
It
So
definitely
turning that
is.
around to yourself, what are places you're working on, or diving into challenges that you feel like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do that, or I'm taking on something that seems like a stretch.
Yeah, one at my last job, one instance where I felt like I kind of was tricked into something is, I was waiting around for um, a big project that would be just mine. And I was waiting to find out how I would be prepared for it. And one day my boss just gave it to me. And he said, well, to do this project, you need A, B, and C. And in the last 6 months, you've demonstrated that in other projects that I gave you to kind of test you. So you're ready. And just his faith that he had already seen me demonstrate what I needed to do to succeed at a larger scale was the confidence that I needed to do something I probably never would have dove into myself. So I appreciated that as good coaching.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a great
Because
story.
I think about, a coach never or often doesn't tell you explicitly what to
Mhm.
do. There's always like an oblique angle that he's giving you the instruction that you need. Like a good swim coach won't just say, do it like Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky, right? You know, they
Yeah.
they have a special way that they pull the most water to go fast. But,
Mhm.
a coach won't just say, pull more water all the time. They'll say, grab the water out front or point your fingers to the ground or things that don't make sense to anybody but a swimmer, like use soft hands on your fly, right? These kinds of, it's kind of getting you to do something intuitively without
Mhm.
explicitly hammering it into you. And that's why, you know, I think as a coach or teacher, you're not just dumping raw knowledge into someone to get them to produce more. You're preparing them to be autonomous and make decisions and be productive and fulfilled. And when both of those things happen, that's what makes being a leader fun.
Yeah, it's so true. So you've talked and you've referred to the great leaders and managers you've had in the past as coaches quite a bit. And as we have a whole day dedicated to coaching skills and the training that you're in. How do you see the role of coaching being important as a leader or play in the role as a leader?
I think it's important, and like we said, understanding the whole person. To use coaching as kind of an analogy. Um, you, every player or participant needs to have a basic mastery of skills, and understanding what the skills are in that person is very important for a coach. Not only to know where they fit in the team, but which skills you need to develop. And that goes for weaknesses as well as strengths. If you have Pele on your soccer team, you need to expose people to him and stay out of his way so that he does the mastery that he does, right? So
Mhm.
the the coach, needs to understand each player as an individual in order to get them to work together the best that they can as a team.
Yeah, so true. So when you think about leading teams and leading people, with making sure the incentives and coaching and seeing the whole person in your experience, what have you seen happens when you don't consider the whole person, when it is just about here's a task list, just get your job down, be miserable, and come back tomorrow and do it all over again?
Yeah, that when you see people who feel like they have nowhere to go, they're overwhelmed every day. They say that they're unappreciative and they start looking around at what other people are doing or getting instead of, you know, finding fulfillment in completing their own job, then you're probably doing that. You're doing a bad job coaching when that exists. So keep an eye out for that. In my experience, that's a great indicator that that's not the way to go.
That plays well with what you're talking about with finding some of those personal incentives, like what matters to them, what will they get joy out of and move to, as well as what skills might they need to develop. So it sounds like when you start to see them seeing things externally rather than feeling that internally or what they could be doing or what they enjoy about this, but are instead looking at like what are other people getting or what am I not getting. Sounds like that's a big differentiator, and that makes sense just from a pure like human motivation standpoint. We kind of respond much better to what inherently makes sense to us, and the second we start to look outside, we're kind of losing touch with that personal feeling, at which point it's going to be harder as a manager too to figure out, to your Pele analogy, where are your skills and where do you fit in, where are your frustrations.
Yeah, and where can you go outside your comfort zone to get better? I think happens best when people understand, buy into, and are convicted by a strategy or mission. And if every person in the company doesn't understand that, doesn't care about it, or doesn't see the results of that in their daily life and work, you don't get that full person at work, you know.
Yeah. In a somewhat goofy example, I recently signed up for a adult kickball league, which we don't have a coach, we don't have anything. We just the 11 random people who, through friends of friends, got put together on a field. And there's definitely totally different motivations, right? I mean, like we just joined because we wanted to have something to do and kind of meet some people in the community, and yeah, we are not, as any of our games will show, good at kickball. So it's not the skill that's there. And even though it's fun to win, like we didn't go in there with that motivation. And there are definitely a couple people on the team who I think are very much about trying to win that. So you have these two different competing visions, and it has caused just kind of it's not like disagreement or anger or whatever. It's just a mild chaos, and we're not super effective as a team. Also, because we don't really know each other that well. This is like week 2, so it's not going well on a number of fronts. But that alignment on mission is also completely different, because you'd think in a sport like we can get aligned around the winning, but this is a recreational league that's just randomly after work. So a lot of it is, half of the people are incentivized by getting together, socializing, and having a group. Half the people are incentivized by going to be a kickball star, and it doesn't really mesh well.
Yeah, that's true. And that is a recipe for infighting as well.
Yeah. If I get in a fist fight this season, I'll let you guys know.
Is that what kickball is about? Fist fights?
No, it's about kickboxing.
As long as you're kicking, it falls into the theme.
It's interesting you mentioned, though, just that alignment on the overall strategy, as well as finding people's individual things. You talked about in your swimming analogy, you're talking about things like getting people to intuitively understand what has to happen, and which I think is a much more delicate way of doing it. And it can be very easy to fall into the idea of like, look, we just need to get this thing done, or from my point of view, you just need this skill, or why don't you just do this? Just scoop the water, just push more water. Okay, but what part of the stroke is not pushing? That's really important to understand on the for any person, and that's where I think sometimes people can get trapped by the urgency that we honestly sometimes just create for ourselves in the workplace, and not feel like we have the time to help somebody intuitively understand, like, this will be a much more sustainable growth if I help you where you need it or how you need it, rather than just what I see on the abstract needs to be done.
Yes, and not I think a good leader or coach's role is to help disseminate that strategy in pieces for the team to accomplish as they're going. You can be very easily disengaged, disconcerted, or left behind with, it's January 1st, we're going to make 30% growth this year, right? What does that mean to anybody? You need to boil that down into, what tangible things that we care about today, that we can accomplish, celebrate, and then expand our scope to encompass more and more of the vision until we're all on the same page, right? Making those milestones in pieces for the team to understand they've got a path, rather than looking at the end state that seems so far away and unattainable can just paralyze you on your day-to-day life, right? So having both the strategic vision and the end state in mind, but being able to boil it down for the team into chunks is a really important part of making it happen.
Yeah, it definitely is. I love how you bring up celebration along the way. I actually recently had another conversation. I have a lot of conversations. It's a good thing we do this for a living. Um, Another conversation on how to balance the celebrating when you accomplish something without making it seem like the work is done or that there's no more improvement. And so it's an interesting dichotomy in a way of thinking like, well, if I celebrate, if I celebrate my team for what they've done, what if they perceive it as there was no other way to do it better? And there's no improvement. This is it. It's the end of the line. And yet, we know, and we know, and we also practice the fact that celebrating the process, celebrating, every step is important for that motivation to know that we are on the right track and we can keep going. What have you seen is that balance between like, oh, we're done, we're perfect, and no, we still need to celebrate somehow along the way.
Yeah, like you don't have the end of the year banquet after the second game. You
Mhm.
might have an end zone dance, but you don't finish it off. I
Yeah.
I think that is a balance, and it's something that we all often overlook. Um, just recently, and it doesn't have to be a huge celebration. It can just be the recognition from you know your manager that um, you did something good or that you made a milestone. And to the point that you forget about it, just recently we had a small, critical failure. And when we got together as a team to talk about it, I passed down to the team that, our senior leader noticed that we haven't had one of these in like 8 months. So this one wasn't that big of a deal. We addressed it, but we've let's celebrate the fact that we're not in here every week. So just that recognition from somebody who's noticing and caring can be very meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of feels like that economics that you're talking about, seeing some of the bigger picture in the complex system when you talk about like that end result of, hey, we're going to have 30% growth, or hey, here's a critical incident. But seeing the bigger picture is not only the future, then looking at the past and seeing some of that progress. And did that with that manager that gave you the project you felt like you weren't ready for, had already noted there were parts of your history that showed you were ready for this. And then that gave you that confidence and some getting that holistic picture, both of past and future, and looking at the complex system, not in terms of like, what are the shortest paths to the outcome, but what is the actual scaffolding we need to get to the outcome we're looking for. It's getting 30% growth doesn't happen because you did exact cost cutting. It happens because you put in a system that rewards enough of the right behaviors that in the end you end up with 30% growth or 30% increase. And
Yeah,
having that view is hard, I think, for a lot of people, and sometimes it's easy to forget. It's the second we put goals and measures up, suddenly that's all we're focusing on, rather than like, okay, but what do I need to do, even if it meant slowing down now or putting some support in place so that we can actually get to where we need to go, not just facing that and marching forward on a sprained ankle.
true. And when you talk about, goals and measures, you have to be very careful what you measure and incent upon, because people will do that thing, for good or ill. And to have a truly high functioning team, you have to constantly reinforce um, the letter of the law as subordinate to the spirit of the law. If it stops supporting the larger strategy, then maybe we need to adjust our KPIs and start working towards something different, right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, well, what we measured and how the clarity, like going back to clarity, the clarity of that, like are we all on the same page of what we mean by this KPI or this measure and how we
Exactly.
get there.
I was struck by that. I went to an event recently that was for B Corps. And so they have a whole scoring mechanism for B Corps. You have to get over like 80 points or something to even be certified as a B Corp. And here's the different disciplines you have to do that in. And it strikes me as a place where, like, while the incentive is there, the whole point is to be a more planet, people, and profit based business rather than just profit or just in one angle or another. Having like a real purpose driving all of this. So they put metrics to it. And so I wonder how much effort it takes to continue to update all those KPIs so that it's not just a game of like, okay, well, we can show that we have this kind of carbon, footprint or footprint reduction based on something that may or may not actually be reducing carbon. It's just how it's measured, right? So the danger then becomes like, okay, well, we're playing on that incentive rather than playing towards we just want less greenhouse gases or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be careful.
Yeah, definitely. So at the beginning, we talked about humility and how important it is. How do you show humility as a leader?
Well, I could tell you how I've seen good managers that I've worked for show humility. And, you know, I guess humility is defined as putting yourself in a lower spot. And that manifests itself at work in a number of ways, usually by whether they realize it or not, elevating other people. You know, a humble manager doesn't ever feel like they have to tear down a peer
Mm.
to make themselves seem
Mm.
more legitimate or smarter or have more credibility. They hold up the people of their team and like we talked about already, recognize them as humans and all the different aspects that come along with that and develop, their strengths and weaknesses as they see them. Um, and I think the authentic, humble leader um, has a team that knows, that they've got their back. Like I've worked for people who were only in it for themselves, and it's a crushing, hard way to go to work every day.
Mhm.
And it's almost imperceptible that when you have a humble leader because you realize that you're engaged with your work and you like it better and that um,
Mm.
you'd follow that humble leader anywhere that they would lead you.
Mm.
I've been lucky to work for people who have elicited that response from me.
Mhm.
That's a great way of describing it. So it sounds like there's two big halves of that. There's kind of the actively holding up other people and making sure you're supporting them, you have their back, you're giving them opportunities, as well as some of that, well, almost more, maybe passive is the wrong word, but in my mind, that was the first dichotomy I kind of split on, that passive, like not feeling the ego need to put somebody else down or be better than, or just being able to hold yourself back enough not to feel like you jump on the first insecurity that might pop up. But to see the bigger picture and be like, okay, well, I don't need to tear this person down. I need to build this, or it's okay that they did that, or not feel like it's a zero sum game. So there's a whole bunch of internal work as well as external active support that you can do to go exude. Even if it's not super noticeable and less perceptible, but or not immediately tangible, some of that humility that gets people that inspiration to follow.
Yeah, I like the word exude. I think a humble leader makes the people around them shine, look better, and
Mhm.
it's always, light refracted through them or reflected off of them onto another person or team or project that, their good qualities are, are really shining onto other people and
Mhm.
not just bringing attention to themselves. Um, and I'm lucky to feel that in the workplace where I am now.
So if you were to look back at yourself as a younger leader or as any young leader, what are some advice you'd want to give yourself or things you wish you'd known?
Well, I think the older I get, the less I'm confident that I have all the pieces or know everything. I think at the beginning of my career, I was even more than now, much more apt to, be critical of anything at work. Like, why is the coffee machine here? Why aren't we doing this? Why isn't our healthcare better? Why didn't we buy this company? Why didn't we put out this product? Right? I thought that I had all the answers, and I realize now that I have so few pieces of the overall puzzle, and that trusting the leaders that have more of those pieces and the good ones who trust lower levels of management and workers to pass up information that they otherwise wouldn't have access to so that they can be a highly functioning team is really the most effective way to get things done as a company. And that I think the advice for a younger leader or a younger me would be, talk it through, have the courage to take your ideas up the chain so that people can either tell you you don't have the whole picture, and that's fine. Stay in your lane is an acceptable answer sometimes, or they can hear you out and do something better for the company, because they, that up and down and cross path for information and feedback is really necessary. And the more that you can be a part of that and be realistic about how much of that you actually have, then the better off you'll be. I think something we don't, for all the talk of humility and autonomy and servant leadership, we don't like to use the word obedience. Like, we don't like to talk about that at work. But if you have a virtuous manager who has a strategy that you're on board with, there's really no reason not to exhibit obedience sometimes. It's a very appropriate response. And I probably could have done better at that over the years.
That's a great self-reflection and great advice that probably most people need when they're younger. But yes, I think what you pointed out there is that it's also a two-way street. It's the younger selves knowing that there's a lot more that we don't know. And it's also the senior self knowing that there's a lot that we don't know. And so having that humility of I'm not in the weeds. I am not the one doing this job. So if I come in with a question, a change, a strategy, then do I actually have any the level of understanding of the impact all the way to all the corners of the organization of that? No, I don't. And the only way I can gather that is by asking and having that open conversation and inviting people to come and share what they think, because there's no way I can have any understanding of the impact in every single person and every single corner.
Yep. And just the act of going and soliciting that information, offering that information, apologizing when you make a mistake, builds trust in pathways in the organization that otherwise wouldn't be there, and make it more and more highly functioning.
Yeah.
Definitely does.
One of the many things that I do not know is who said this quote, but at some point I remember a quote that was something like, the more I know I don't. The more you gain, the more you understand things, the more you understand where that understanding is lacking. And I think that helps. And sometimes that needs to give all the answers. It can be a dead giveaway for, I don't think this person has all the answers.
Oh, they don't.
Yeah. Having teenage girls really helped me understand how dumb I really am.
Another way to practice humility.
Yeah, it seemed like I was reminded every day there for a while, many years.
That is a good, yeah, that would definitely make it an experience of humility. So you mentioned authenticity a little bit as part of humility, and that's the theme of our podcast. So what does authenticity mean to you?
I guess there's a couple ways I could have, knowing you were going to ask that question, there's a couple ways I could have gone about this. One would be writing it down and thinking about it first, but it may have, I've listened to some of, if not all of your podcasts. And authenticity is being real, genuine, legitimate. And it may have been put by one of your podcasts already, so I won't say this was original, but it resolves the question, am I being manipulated? So someone who's authentic, whatever they're giving you, you know that it's altruistic, and that's so important at work. And I think Wiggs put it very well in the podcast with that he did with I think Ryan and Kyle, that there's authenticity doesn't mean just being yourself at work, because it can mean being a self that is my work self, where I'm acting in bounds of the professional environment and maybe carrying myself differently than I do at home. Actually, my kids have a joke, don't call dad. He'll give you his work voice if he's in there at work. They don't like the work voice. It's not the dad voice. It's not that there's a different me. It's that I'm acting within the bounds of what's expected of me in that situation. But you can still be authentic and legitimate and genuine and non-manipulative, I think.
I'm not going to pretend to remember the exact words that were used in every single one of the definitions we've had from guests, but I do not remember the manipulation piece, which I really like. That, like, you don't feel manipulated when somebody's being authentic. Yeah. That's a big piece.
And you're being authentic when you don't feel manipulated or too pushed by other influences. That's coming from a really true portion of yourself. And I think you describe it well. There are different arenas, but you can still be authentic to your purpose in those arenas. There might be you might have a purpose at work, and that just kind of comes across with it. Can feel like a different demeanor, but it's not the same as being a different person if you're still true to that lack of manipulation.
Yeah. We'll go with that. I like it, Alex.
All right. So where can people find you? Should they want to? Should you want them to find you?
If you want to be found.
I don't do a lot of that. They can always get me at joeymessina@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, Joe, and thanks for talking through all these things. It's really just fun to pick your brain, and we appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. It's always a joy.
That was fun. I appreciate you having me. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time.